My sister showed up at dawn with 2 kids and a story. By lunch, her Instagram told the truth. Champagne, dancing, no children in sight. I didn't plead. I did this. By night, the posts were gone. Relatives whispered, and she pounded my door saying I'd started a disaster. My sister's name is Sabrina, and for most of my life, she's been a source of stress. We've never gotten along. Sabrina is manipulative, craves attention, and often acts like the world owes her. She was born premature, and from the very start that turned into a constant worry for our parents. Mom and Dad felt she had to be protected more than usual. Unfortunately, in the shadow of that hyper care for my sister, I often felt forgotten. My parents could miss my school plays, my basketball games, and sometimes even forget to pick me up after events. Birthdays were the most painful subject from childhood on. Sabrina got sweet, thoughtful gifts, the exact things she wanted. I got "You'll grow into it" books or plush bears I didn't need. Year after year, it reminded me, in our family, I wasn't the center of the universe. I might have found a way to live with the unfairness from our parents, but Sabrina took everything to a new level, enjoying their favoritism and using it against me. Once, for example, she tore my favorite dress while I was sleeping, just because the boy she liked had asked me out, not her. I cried from anger and hurt. It was my only fancy dress, bought specifically for a school party. When I told our parents, they scolded her, briefly, half-heartedly, but once Sabrina played the victim, burst into tears and said she had called dibs on that boy first, the whole tone changed. They suggested that from then on I not pay attention to boys who already interest your sister, so as not to hurt her feelings. It was brutally unfair. I didn't choose who looked at whom, and I certainly wasn't obligated to live by her rules. There was also the amusement park episode. For months, I begged my parents to take me to Six Flags Great America for my birthday, the park in Gurnee, outside Chicago. My parents almost agreed, until Sabrina announced she wanted to go there too, but for her birthday, which came before mine. In the end, she went, barely rode anything, didn't even try half the rides, and when my birthday came around, I was told, "There's no point going to Six Flags twice in 1 year." They took me to the same old restaurant we always went to. I sat with a slice of cake and thought how, in our family, joy was allotted from a list where my name wasn't at the top. As we got older, Sabrina only sharpened her methods. She loved compliments that made me feel worse. "Your face looks better with glasses." "You like that boy? I thought you were into girls." In public, she was sweet and helpful. In private, she was my worst nightmare. Sometimes she could be gentle and attentive, but only if she needed something. Once she got what she wanted, she ignored me or started to snipe. When I was 17, I had my first boyfriend. Sabrina worked hard to seed doubt in me. "He's too handsome for you. He'll dump you. Better dump him first." Every time he came over, she flirted with him, stood too close, touched his hand, laughed too loudly. He was uncomfortable, and after watching her little performances and listening to her running commentary, I actually broke up with him. Looking back now, I can see he was fine. The problem wasn't him. After high school, I left for another state to study engineering in college. I came home to Illinois, outside Chicago, for the holidays, and every time dove back into the same toxic atmosphere. Thin mockery, sharp asides, the way parts got doled out around Sabrina. At 25, my sister met her future husband, Kyle, and 2 years later they announced their engagement. Honestly, we were surprised. We knew she'd had other romances going at the same time. But we were happy anyway. Maybe this was a chance at an adult, calmer life. Sabrina made me her maid of honor. My parents beamed, "You'll see! You two will get closer." Inside, I tensed. I knew the role wouldn't be easy, and I was right. Sabrina used my appointment as a lever of control. Any question turned into a reason to pressure me. She regularly threatened to demote me to a regular bridesmaid or cut me from the role entirely if I didn't do things the right way. Any conversation about planning could burst into yelling. When she asked my opinion, I answered honestly, and almost always got a wave of irritation. "Why did you say that?" "You just want the spotlight, don't you? Are you even listening to me?" At some point I went quiet, simply not to trigger another explosion. Once, at a family lunch, I carefully asked whether the maid of honor would have a separate dress, just to understand her vision. Sabrina flared up immediately. "Of course you want a dress so everyone looks at you." Then the talk turned to lodging for the guests. My mom noted it might be smart to reserve an Airbnb in advance. I nodded. Made sense. Sabrina snapped. "We already discussed it with Kyle. It's going to be hotels." "Before you agree with anyone's suggestions, you check with me. You're my maid of honor. Basically, you work for me." I fell silent. I tried to steer the conversation to neutral ground. Pointless. She kept saying I was creating bad vibes. My mom tried to step in, but Sabrina cut her off. "I'm tired of dealing with such an immature maid of honor. Time to grow up." In the parking lot outside the restaurant, she yelled at me for another 10 minutes. Same words, same tone. I wanted to sink through the pavement, but my car was 20 minutes walk away, and I had to wait for her to drive me. The wedding day went relatively well, if you can call it that. The ceremony, no disasters. But even there, Sabrina found reasons to pick at me over little things. At the reception, she raised her voice at me a few times in front of everyone, and the whole atmosphere tightened like a wire. She didn't like the music, then the waiters aren't serving drinks right. Then I was talking to guests too long. When it was time for my speech, I stood up wanting to say something warm and sincere. From her seat, Sabrina gestured. "Wrap it up." I tried to keep it short. Later that night, she said I had brought up the wrong childhood details and deliberately made her look bad in front of Kyle's family. I was crushed. Everyone else had liked the speech, and my parents hadn't said one critical word. Staring at myself in the hotel mirror, I thought, how did I end up here? Guilty by default again? The next morning, once the wedding noise had settled, a simple truth finally landed. The anxiety of the last months was huge, not because weddings are stressful in general, but because everything once again orbited Sabrina. She had been the source of my stress all these years. I caught myself thinking, I wish I'd had the nerve to refuse this role. But I knew my parents would have blamed me. When that marathon ended, I buried myself in work. Breathing got easier. A few months later, I met Ethan. Calm, attentive. The kind of person who makes the inside of you go quiet. He worked in IT, loved what he did, and didn't need to brag about it. We started dating. A year later, we moved in together. My parents were happy for us. Sabrina, of course, found something to say. He's a bore. Just another computer nerd. I just shrugged. I wasn't interested in her opinion. Ethan made more than I did, but that didn't matter. I felt good with him, and that was enough. Then, at a family dinner in Chicago, Sabrina announced she was pregnant. You'd think that had nothing to do with me. But right after her, we have good news came. I can't wait for you to be an aunt. It's going to be such a help. It sounded like a plan made without me. Sabrina is an adult, with a husband and parents, but somehow she appointed me nanny by default. I had never lived with children, had no experience, and I hadn't signed up to be the on-call sister who drops everything at a snap of the fingers. Still, I kept quiet. In our family, silence often passed for the best way to keep the peace. And yet something in me was already shifting. I needed to learn to say no, even if the answer earned me bad again. And then, sometime later, came that very emergency that started the story of kids on my doorstep. But that's another chapter. What mattered by then was this. On the map of my life, there was Chicago, the suburbs, a college in another state, my first place on my own, and a red thread ran through every point. Sabrina, with her habit of putting herself at the center and acting like everyone else was there to support her plot. I was tired of living in that script, and only just learning to write my own. I've always felt awkward around kids, and never had the urge to coo over babies. I was perfectly fine not having any of my own, for now, so my sister's line about how she would, of course, be counting on me scared me. In that moment, I felt cornered. I knew Sabrina would find a way to make me watch her child, especially since I work from home, and it would be convenient for her to drop the baby off for a couple of hours, whenever. Sabrina did not recognize the word boundaries. The second I tried to set even the faintest line, our parents rushed to defend her, as if any no aimed her way automatically meant I was being cruel. When Sabrina's first baby was born, I watched the little one now and then. At first it wasn't too burdensome. Her husband Kyle worked nights, Sabrina worked days, and all I had to do was give Kyle a chance to sleep while the baby was awake. I was never completely alone with the child. One of them was usually home or close by. And the first time I helped, the baby was already 6 months old, an age that's a little easier. But over time, those one-off favors stopped being rare. The requests kept coming, and with them came constant nitpicking about how I did things. I could be working, Zoom, emails, deadlines, and suddenly the phone would ring. Sabrina or my mother. "What are your plans for the weekend?" If I honestly said I didn't have any yet, I was simply informed as a fact. "Then you're going to Sabrina's. She needs to sleep, shop, get her nails done. The kids are on you." And that was the end of the conversation. Little by little, I felt like I'd picked up a second job. Unpaid, no schedule, toxic boss. You'd think my sister would at least say thank you, but no. Almost as soon as I walked back into my own place, she'd call our mother to complain that I did everything wrong. The diaper the wrong way. The bottle not warm enough. You put him down on his side, not his back. Tiny things she latched onto, and it drove me crazy because I was doing her a favor and getting scolded for it. Now you can see why I call her a manipulator. Sabrina and I have never been close. The least she could have done was acknowledge that I was helping. Instead, she smiled to my face and then worked even harder behind my back to sour things. Eventually, I got truly angry. It started to hit my mental health. I slept badly, braced for the phone to ring with a weight in my chest. Ethan was the first to notice. One evening we talked honestly, and I finally said everything out loud, without worrying about how it would look. He said calmly what I'd been afraid to admit. It was time to set boundaries with my family. Not to start a war, so that I could have a life. The next time they called with an urgent favor, I said no. Sabrina raised her voice. My mother joined the chorus about, "Do it for the family." I held my ground. No means no. A lot of unpleasant words were said, and in the end I told them both to go to hell. It wasn't pretty, but otherwise they simply didn't hear me. I decided I'd already done more than I owed, and I didn't want anything to do with my sister or her child, at least not until they started treating me with respect. I cut contact with Sabrina completely. I didn't answer calls, and I didn't open the door when she showed up unannounced. My parents tried to talk me around for a while, but finally gave up. I wasn't budging. Almost 2 years went by. In that time, Sabrina had a second baby, also with Kyle. And last year, my mother called to say Sabrina and Kyle were getting a divorce. I didn't want to get pulled in again, but the news still surprised me. After I pressed for details, I learned Sabrina had been involved with people at work. Kyle found her second phone, the one she hid from him, and there was enough intimate messaging on it to take the rose tint off. He quietly gathered evidence and filed for divorce. It blindsided Sabrina. He served the papers without warning, and when she tried to wriggle out of it, Kyle said calmly that he knew everything. She begged for forgiveness, and he left. I was truly shocked then. Looking back now, I think Kyle was too good for that whole carnival. In a way, I'm glad he got out. After the divorce, Sabrina moved back in with our parents in that same house in the Chicago suburbs. From them, I heard the same refrain. She disappeared at night, stumbled home at dawn smelling of alcohol. She was late to work until they fired her, and the worse things got, the more she drank. While Sabrina found herself, our parents had to carry her kids. It went on for months. Meanwhile, my life kept its own pace. Ethan and I got a dog, signed a mortgage, and slowly moved into our place. An ordinary corner of Cook County, quiet streets, those neighborhood lamps with snow hanging from them in neat fringe. We talked about a wedding, no rush, just steady in the knowledge we're a team. I wanted the housewarming small, but we still had to invite my parents. Unfortunately, they didn't come alone. They brought Sabrina and her kids without telling me. Seeing her on my doorstep lit a fuse, but I wasn't going to make a scene. Guests, music, the table, the smell of baking from the kitchen. Ethan, like always, welcomed everyone, offered drinks. I looked at my parents, and my look probably said everything. My dad came over first, embarrassed, and admitted he hadn't wanted to bring Sabrina, but my mom really hoped we would reconcile and decided this was the perfect moment. Sabrina loudly told the kids to go hug your aunt, because I'm family, right? I gave a tight smile while they wrapped their arms around me. My chest still pricked. Then Sabrina delivered a little lecture about how an aunt should be more involved, because the kids barely recognize me and I ought to try harder. I clenched my teeth so I wouldn't say something I'd regret in front of everyone. All evening I noticed Sabrina barely put her glass down, wine after wine, and not a single word to the kids. And the kids, to be honest, had total free rein. They chased our dog through the house, tried to kick her or yank her tail. They pushed at our bedroom door even though I'd closed it on purpose. They managed to break a vase on the way, just playing tag. I was at my limit. I kept watching Sabrina, waiting to see if she would say anything at all. Nothing. She laughed and chatted as if there weren't children in the house. When guests asked for a tour, Sabrina of course joined the group. I showed the guest room, the study with our desk and shelves of books, and when we stepped out to the backyard, she declared, loud enough for all to hear, "This place is too big for just two," and immediately asked, right there, when we were finally planning kids. Conversations snapped toward me. People looked, some with awkward smiles. I shut it down. "That's not your business." Sabrina shot back that my life choices were a family matter, especially since I'm an aunt. The tension in the group jumped, but I chose not to blow it up in front of everyone, changed the subject, and kept the tour moving. Later, when most guests had left, I pulled Sabrina aside. No shouting, but firm. I listed what had happened that night. The wine, the kids without supervision, the humiliating remarks. I reminded her we have a history. It's not a simple one, and I'm not obligated to tolerate her excursions at me in my own home. As expected, she took it badly, accused me of arrogance and ingratitude, and even claimed I owed her time for letting me babysit her kids, so absurd I didn't know what to say at first. Our parents tried to smooth it over. My mother stepped between us in her usual way, pleading to forgive and forget. This time I stood firm and asked everyone to leave. After that night, I decided I didn't want to see Sabrina again, and honestly, I needed distance from my mother too, who'd spent years covering for her. I thought, take them out of my life and everything will settle. But the very next morning, early, the sky still gray, there was a hard knock at the door. Sabrina stood there. She looked desperate. Jacket thrown on any which way, hair a mess, eyes red. The kids beside her, sleepy and bundled into their coats. She started talking fast. "Work emergency. No one to leave them with. You're the only one. Just a few hours, please." She swore there was no one else. Blurted that our parents were on a trip to Aunt Linda's near Springfield. Check if you don't believe me. And Kyle was fresh off nights. Not picking up, sleeping it off. And As usual, they'd bet on my empathy. I looked at the kids, yawning, rubbing their eyes, clearly hauled out of bed at dawn. My thoughts scrambled. Once again, I was being presented with a fait accompli. No plan, no asking, just, you have to. I asked about our parents again. Sabrina repeated it word for word. I did plan to verify, and then I agreed, reluctantly. She brightened instantly, kissed the kids in passing, and drove off. I closed the door and stood there with two feelings at once: irritation at her nerve and pity for the kids hauled to my place at daybreak. But anger at adults doesn't belong on children's shoulders. I exhaled and decided I'd do everything I could to make the kids feel calm here. We made a rule: breakfast first, then cartoons, then games. I pulled out paper, markers, stickers, suggested we draw. We built a garage out of boxes, laid a road with blue tape, and I showed them how our dog loves to hunt for hidden treats. To my surprise, they settled quickly once they felt clear rules and a warm, quiet rhythm. After a while, I caught myself feeling not just okay with it, I was enjoying the time. We laughed at crooked little houses on the page, argued over which car was fastest, and fed the dog together, counting the bites. 1, 2, 3. For the first time in a long while, I looked at children and saw not someone else's responsibility, but two small people I could give a couple of peaceful hours. I was still bitter about the way Sabrina dragged me into this. Urgent and non-negotiable. But those few hours showed me something else. I can be grown and kind even when the world around me is full of other people's mistakes, and I can hold my boundaries without becoming cruel. That turned out to matter more than I thought. By lunchtime, I caught myself thinking I had no idea whether the kids had any food allergies and decided not to risk it. I needed to check with Sabrina. I dialed her number, expecting a quick answer. Silence. Tried again, straight to voicemail. I lowered the phone and turned back to the kids. Better to ask directly. I explained gently that Mom seemed very busy and couldn't pick up, and then carefully asked if there were any foods they were allergic to or anything they absolutely didn't like. The older girl, weighing what they do eat and don't, blurted out that maybe Mom wasn't answering because she was at a wedding. I frowned and asked how she knew. She hesitated and admitted she'd heard Sabrina talking about the wedding with a friend on the drive over. The pieces locked into place at once. I thanked the kids for being honest, reassured them, and stepped into the hall to call my parents. The conversation dragged. My mother dodged, said, "Sabrina has hard days too. She's only human," and only after a long push finally admitted it. Yes, Sabrina had gone to a wedding where children weren't invited. She went with a new boyfriend who, it turned out, didn't even know she had 2 kids. My mother tried to justify it with, men don't like women with children, and Sabrina didn't want to scare him off right away. Heat flashed through me. More lies, more manipulation, and once again it all leaned on my willingness to help. I hung up, and just to pin things down, opened Sabrina's Instagram. Fresh stories, champagne, laughter, the venue, the dress. She smiled into the camera, clinked glasses, danced. I scrolled her grid and realized there wasn't a single photo of her kids. My sister, a mother of 2, was carefully presenting herself as carefree and child-free, as if her own children didn't exist in her public life. By evening, Sabrina came back. In the doorway. No apology, no attempt to explain. "So, how did they behave?" In that tone I knew too well. The fight was inevitable. I said it calmly but hard. I wasn't going to participate in her deceit anymore. If she dropped the kids on me again under cover of work while she went on a date or to a party, I'd contact the authorities. Here in Illinois, that's DCFS/Child Protective Services, and make a record of it. Sabrina flared. The insults came easy. "Who do you think you are? Heartless? Don't value family." At that moment, Ethan got home, heard the shouting from the entryway, stood beside me, and said evenly that if the volume went up again, he would call the police. Sabrina turned on her heel and left, tossing over her shoulder that I'd regret this. When the door closed, I shook with emptiness. My head rang, and with it came a lightness. Finally, said out loud, I was grateful for Ethan, grateful that he stands beside me exactly when it's hard. There wasn't much time to settle. Soon my mother and Aunt Linda called. They urged me to be understanding of a single mother's struggles, insisted that family helps in hard times. I answered that help is agreement and mutuality, not exploitation and lies. We hung up, and I went for a glass of water. My hands were still shaking. After that, messages started coming, from friends and strangers both. Someone had heard, someone had seen the stories, someone just felt for me. Many shared their own tales of relatives like mine. Reading them, I finally saw what I'd been afraid to name. For years, my mother had sustained a family script in which Sabrina was forgiven everything, and my boundaries were optional. Even now, instead of saying this isn't okay, she was searching for excuses. I decided to talk to my mother seriously. Before that, I called Aunt Linda. I wanted her side. Turned out Mom hadn't told her the whole truth. I had to fill in the gaps. Linda apologized and said she'd speak with my mother. What followed I sadly predicted. Soon Mom texted to scold me for dragging your aunt into our business and making your sister look bad. I was tired of it, but I understood. I couldn't keep running in circles. Things had to be set straight face to face. About 2 weeks went by. Despite my distance from Sabrina, the family tension only grew. My mother kept insisting I forgive and come back. Pushed me again to watch the kids at least sometimes, and even tried an emotional squeeze. She and Dad were getting older, and soon Sabrina will be your only family. I suggested we meet one-on-one and asked her in advance not to steer the talk toward saving my sister. We sat in a quiet cafe on the north side and ordered tea. I took a long breath and said this. I love her and Dad and want a relationship with them, but my emotional health is not small change for family diplomacy. I explained how deeply Sabrina's years of manipulation had hurt me, and that Mom and Dad had seen it but looked away. I told her how often I'd been ignored, used, bent, and how all of it packed itself into a steady anxiety inside me. Mom listened, and her face moved from guilt to a kind of soft understanding. Then she went quiet and said a thing I didn't expect to hear. She had always known what Sabrina was like, but pretended not to. When she was born premature, I was terrified, Mom said. And I thanked heaven every day that she was alive. I forgave everything, because in my head there was only one line. Let everything be okay. Something very old clicked inside me. I'm your child too, I said. And I needed you too. It isn't my fault I was born healthy. We talked a long time about boundaries, about how you can't bury problems for the sake of peace at home. I said I needed time and space. I wasn't ready to interact like before. My mother asked me not to disappear for years, said she loved me and was sorry for so much. I promised not to vanish, but repeated that I truly needed room so the rebuilding inside me wouldn't collapse. Later, my father called. He said he understood my decision, that he was sorry he'd not seen the obvious for so long, and that he was always ready to support me. Those words, when a father tells his grown daughter, I'm on your side, somehow hit the hardest. I put cameras on the front door and told my parents, if Sabrina tried another emergency without my consent, I would act under the law, police, DCFS, whatever it took. This wasn't about punishing. It was about protecting the children and my life. 4 months passed. I stepped away from social media on purpose, deleted the apps, breathing got easier. I started seeing a therapist regularly, and for the first time in a long time, felt the anxiety lifting not for a day or two, but for real. Things with Ethan were steady and quiet. Last month he proposed, on the beach at Lake Michigan. Simple and tender. Wind off the water, our dog's fur on my coat. Ethan a little nervous with a ring in his hand. I said yes and laughed while tears slid down my face. We called my parents. We don't talk often, but they were truly happy. They love Ethan, and that's one of the few things we don't disagree on. News of Sabrina comes in scraps. In the end, my parents got tired of her nights out, and her Dawn returns smelling of alcohol, and she moved out. They agreed to pay her rent for 6 months. After that, she's on her own. Kyle sends child support reliably. Whether she'll have enough for the rest, I doubt it. I want very much for her to learn to own her actions, at least for her children's sake. Some evenings, Ethan and I walk down to the water, the same shore, the same lights on the horizon. I think about how easy it is to confuse help with control, duty with manipulation, family with the absence of boundaries. I lived a long time as if every no of mine were a crime. Now I have a different agreement with myself. I can be kind and still not let people use me. I can love my family and not return to the role I barely escaped. I have a home in the Chicago suburbs where it smells like coffee and bread on the weekends, where the dog rests her muzzle on my knees, where the person beside me keeps my light switched on. And I have rules that are no longer up for debate. No lies, no accusations, no family necessity as a cover for someone else's irresponsibility. Not under any roof, even if it's the roof of my own house. That's it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Personally, I don't think Sabrina will change. She'll keep on with the same bad behavior. And thank you for watching till the end. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new videos if you haven't already. Check out our previous videos. You'll see them right here. And good luck!